Hello, I want to introduce you to Hyperclay, which is a radically simple way of building portable, malleable, shareable software. It simplifies the standard web application into a single file. That file is HTML, and it is given one extra power beyond a normal HTML file, which is the ability to overwrite itself. By making an HTML file shapeable and malleable, and allowing it to save over itself, we create a new type of software, a new type of software object that is self-contained, easy to reason about, easy to think about, and just kind of beautiful to hold in your mind. Let me show you an example. So this is a simple application that has some check marks, and it's meant to represent the extra hours that I worked the past 4 weeks, and I can send this to my boss because it's online. This is just a single HTML file with a very minimal script and a very minimal CSS. Let me show you what it looks like. So in here, we just have a bunch of checkboxes, and they're just lined up next to each other. And they have this special persist attribute next to them. And all that means is that when I click them, their checked attribute is going to be stored in the DOM. And we need that because when we save, what Hyperclay does is it takes the entire DOM, packages it up, and sends it to the backend, so it can overwrite itself. Now, when we refresh, this checked attribute on this input is persisted. We also have the concept of edit mode. So edit mode is true because I am the owner and editor of this page, which means if I open this up as an anonymous visitor, I can actually not edit this page, and these checkboxes are disabled. So this is part of Hyperclay's save cycle. Because we need to fit an entire application in one document and in one UI, we have some special helpers that help you remove the admin controls from the page to strip them all. And we do that before the page is saved, so that when the page is saved to the backend, it is the canonical version of the page that anyone can view. And and so it's just a static website. It's just static HTML. It will load quickly. You can deploy it anywhere. Anyone can access it from anywhere. It's shareable. It's viewable. I can send this to my boss, like I was saying, and he can see the extra hours that I worked over the past 4 weeks. The cool thing about edit mode and being the page owner is also that this is now not only a digital object that can overwrite itself, right? That's malleable. But also, it's able to be edited live in the browser. So one way to edit it is by using its own UI, and that's preferable in a lot of cases. But let's say these last 2 weeks here are not really relevant to me because I didn't work extra those days. I can just delete those in the developer tools and save the page. And now those weeks are gone. And this is the actual application that we're working with. This is the actual document. So it's an internet connected document that is malleable in any way. As long as you're the owner, you have control over it to shape it. And you always have, actually, I think they're going to be, you always have access to the versions. So if I go into the past versions, I can always see past versions of it, and I can restore any of those versions or go back to an earlier period where I didn't make a mistake. So that's nice as well. And yeah, this kind of UI means that basically I can build my own UI on top of any HTML file, and that UI is contained in the application itself. So the editable UI is contained in the application itself, and it's stripped out for regular users. But then if someone is going to copy my page, right, they want to use this page for themselves, they can copy the HTML or duplicate it, and that it's going to come with the administrator UI built in for them. So it's a transferable self-contained package that contains its own editable UI. And also the nice thing about it too is that let's say you have, well, I'll get into that later about how to strip out different options. So these are some of the example apps that I want to show you that have been written using Hyperclay. And Hyperclay is kind of the foundation, but really what I call them is HTML apps. And I want, other platforms to be able to support HTML apps because really all they are is just HTML files that can overwrite themselves. And we've developed a few different best practices around them to make them easier to use. And one of them is the save strip serve cycle where we strip out all the admin controls. But another one is like the persist attribute that will persist the form controls to the DOM. But there are a few other best practices and utilities that we use. So I'll show you the page writer. So this is, actually, I'm going to show you writer because that's the more modern version of it. So this is something I've always wanted, just a way to publish my thoughts instantly that looks beautiful, that doesn't have a bunch of ads covering it. And so all I have to do is open this editor. I get syntax highlighting built in. And anything I type here, I can just instantly save and send to someone else, and they're going to be able to see my changes. And the way this works is we're not just using the DOM as the database in terms of its attributes. We're also using the DOM as the database in a script tag. So we actually serialize all the Quill data. Quill is the open source WYSIWYG editor we're using here. And we serialize that to JSON and then write that to the DOM and use the DOM as the database. So this is still a portable, self-contained, editable, shareable application. But it has its own little database built in, and I can download this. I can download this file. I can put it up somewhere else as a static file. It's really easy to export my sites from one service and import them to another. And worst case is, you're going to import them into a static host, and you can just serve the static version of them and edit the code manually. But of course, if you want, you can also just run them locally on your own machine with a very simple server, and then you have full edit access through their own UI, which is really, really nice. So that's an example of using a script tag as a database. Then we have Kanban. This is just a really nicely designed Kanban board, and I can drag and drop items to different lists, and I can rearrange the lists. I think I actually can't rearrange the list right now. But yeah, you can add new stacks, you can add new cards, and then you can drag the cards between the lists. And someday you will be able to drag the lists. Yeah, so this is an example of how the UI is really the application. So you can make the UI look however you want to best suit the way you think. And then however it's designed to modify itself is going to be the result of what your actions are on the page. Then I have my personal, actually, I'll show you my personal site. So this is panphora.com. This is where I log my work, and I can show you the editable version of this by going to panphora.hyperclay.com. And this is my own kind of personal editable UI that I've found to be the most helpful for me in the way that I think. And it's just these simple toggleable menus next to each item. And some of the cool things I've done here are, let's see, I've made this content editable field, but I've prevented enter on it. So a lot of browsers have problems with content editable and formatting that correctly when you use new lines. But if you want inline editing and you just don't allow the enter key to be pressed, then you avoid all those problems. But of course, I'm only editing this on myself, so it doesn't really matter that there's those inconsistencies, and content editable looks and works fine. So multi-line is okay too. But that's just an example of if you want to cut down on cross-browser bugs. And then there's this example. So I duplicate the post. This is kind of fascinating because it's really easy to write this inline code that handles this. So we have an on-click handler. This is just an inline on-click. And what this does is it gets the nearest post. So this is just the nearest element with an attribute called post. And then it inserts before that the same post cloned. So it's very, very simple to implement. And this is an example of some of the custom code that we've written. So this is very similar to jQuery, but we've kind of modified it to be a little bit more succinct and to fit perfectly into inline event handlers, because we just want to look at the code and have a locality of concern when we're debugging or we're modifying this code. So this is another example where we can add a new project, right? So if I want to add a new project to this particular post, we just clone it and insert it before, and boom, it's just very easy. And I can cycle through projects. This is one of the more fascinating ones, where I can cycle through all of the projects that exist on the page. So we're using the DOM truly as the database here. We're querying the rest of the page for all of its available projects on the page. And then we're stepping through them based on a property. So here we're getting the nearest project and we're cycling forward. The 1 means forward, -1 would mean backwards. And we're doing that based on what the project attribute is set to. And so you can see, I think it's here. Let's see, project equals. Yeah, project. Oh, actually, sorry. Yeah, this is actually more fascinating than I was thinking. So this is not based on what the project attribute is sent to. It's based on the inner HTML of the project. So it actually grabs the entire inner HTML of this project and compares it to the other elements on the page, and then cycles through it in order to loop through all of the available projects on the page. And this is kind of cool. It's one of the cool things you can do when you treat the DOM as the database. And yeah, I think this is kind of one of the furthest things I've done with this. Oh, another one is switching this. So I can switch the type of project it is. And you'll actually notice if I switch it on one of them, so I switched it on Doomgrid, I switched this to Fun Project. If I scroll down to Doomgrid down here, it's also switched to Fun Project. So it's updated both of them. So this is kind of interesting. So this is from here. This is on click. It not only cycles the attribute based on what the attribute name is set to, but it also executes this sync out attribute. And if we look at this sync out attribute, what that does is it grabs all the projects, it filters them to exclude the current project, and then it matches the text of the project name. So it's using the project name as kind of the key to match against. And then it matches it to the current project name. So it's grabbing all the projects on the page that aren't this project, right? And that match the project name that we've set here, because that's the unique identifier. And then we're going to replace it with a clone of this entire DOM node. And it's very simple. It's very easy to read. But a lot of effort would go into building this on the backend, right? You would have to have models and controllers and templates, and you'd have to have different rendering engines. But this is very fast. The DOM is very fast. So even if I had 1,000 different projects rendered on this page, it would still be just as fast. So the DOM works as a personal, UI and a personal database for small personal projects, very, very convincingly. It's only when you get to like 5,000 or 10,000 items that you're going to experience a little lag, and even then it's going to be pretty efficient. Just look at Facebook's source code, to see how many div elements you can have on a page. So that's kind of some of the more advanced syntax you can get into if you use something like jQuery to kind of scan through the DOM. And that's an open source library I use called $JS. And that's the one we just saw. And then we have a landing page. This is something I've just recently built based on my recent exploration into marketing and telling good stories around pain points to try to get more customers. So this has a nice headline, a nice sub headline, some nice buttons, great images, and it's just pretty standard. It's pretty much a standard landing page. But what's nice about it is that now I can distribute this to anyone, and if they edit it, the result is a static website that just looks and behaves like a normal static website. And they can just fill this in with their own content, upload their own images, and I've given them a jumpstart on creating their venture and creating their project. And what I imagine is that a lot of people could do this for their particular field, package up their learnings and their experience into a UI that guides people in a certain direction. And I know people already do this, but it's getting a lot easier with AI assisted coding. And they could package that up into something that's going to help other people learn and organize their thoughts. And then redistribute it as a single HTML file and application that those people could host, share, or download and use locally. And that's what we come to next. So we have Hyperclay local. And what this allows is just kind of regular users to experience the magic of local app development without actually having to code, right? So they can run this application called Hyperclay local, and all this does is runs a very simple Node.js server in a folder of your choice. And the only thing you have to do is start the server. You select the folder and start the server, and then you get access to a browser where the applications that the HTML applications that you've put into that folder are now available to you as local only applications. So now I can open up the devlog and I can use this as a personal devlog, right? I can say, this is what I did today, and I can save it. And now this is persisted, right? So if I refresh this page, this is persisted. This is my own personal local application. And I even get site versions on my local machine. So I can go back and see previous versions of this devlog before I modified it and what it looked like. So that's really, really, really cool. And I think it's going to make a big difference for people who want to have local first software that they control and that they play around with. And maybe they load it up into AI and modify it. And then they host it on Hyperclay, or they host it on another service that supports HTML apps. So for me, this Hyperclay gives you an experience of not web development, but of a type of development that's a lot simpler and that lets you build complete applications. Just going back to the first slide, the problem with this approach is that you spend a lot of time building up this model of data and behavior that is so complicated and so unbalanced that it almost feels impossible to ever call it finished or done. Whereas the model you get with Hyperclay is in a single file, and all you have access to is the DOM. So really what you end up creating are tools of thought or tools of visualization or tools of transforming one viewpoint into another. But you don't get all of these external connections or, kind of nested dependencies that can kind of eventually lead to just endless rabbit holes with what is called web development, right? Here, you're limited in scope, and that's intentional so that you can create these packaged, self-contained applications that are really powerful and empowering. So yeah, in the end, Hyperclay gives you this loophole, skipping over all of these in-between steps and lets you treat the DOM as a database and lets you embed your administrator UI into the application itself. So you can use a nice, smooth, easy UI to modify your application the way you want to do it and the way you think about it, without the headache of external services and configuration and integrations. And yeah, just to give you an idea of kind of the overall mission we're going for, the problem with the digital experience, like building digital things, is that a lot of the time you're not able to focus on the core thing you're building. Here I compare it to an orange, where in the real world you have a physical object that you can hold, you can mold, you can cut, you can slice it, and you have control over it, right? And when you come back to it later, it doesn't just reset to its initial state. It's persistently malleable. And a lot of what you end up doing when you're creating digital objects is creating a persistence layer around them. Instead of focusing on making or shaping the core experience, you end up distracted by shaping the experience that shapes the experience. And so what we're trying to do is merge these all into one, so that instead of HTML and templates and an API and data, you have them all in one layer, one flat file. And what's nice about that, it's really honestly so nice to just be able to hold a full application in your head and not have to think in terms of branching complexity. So yeah, thank you for watching, and I appreciate your time.